Good morning to you all. It is Monday, April 21st, 2025, the day after Easter. Got news that Pope Francis passed away this morning at 88. He had been plagued with health issues probably the last few years of his term. And here's the thing that's really weird. I've only had two popes, well, technically three, but Benedict left really quick. But there were only really two popes in my lifetime. It was Pope John Paul II and then Pope Francis. And while I was excited, for those of you that don't know anything about Catholicism, you're going to be like, what's he talking about? I don't have time to go into everything. Or else this would end up being like a couple of hour long video. Hopefully it's only like 15, 30 minutes. But I was excited when Francis was picked because allegedly he was who Pope John Paul II would have liked to replace him. Like, the Pope doesn't get to pick their successor, so to speak, but they can give like input. And the cardinals, according to the faith, are supposed to believe, or we're supposed to believe as Catholics, that they pray and they talk to God and they have conversations with God, and God leads them to the next pope. There's a lot of about Catholicism that I just see as bullshit now. But again, that's for another video. I still do consider myself Catholic, but I also consider myself an anarchist with conflictions. I don't believe anybody should have any kind of authority over me except for whoever created me. Whether that's God or Christ or the universe, or I don't know. But I definitely believe that there is a higher power. And a lot of stuff that I've seen throughout my life kind of illustrates that for me too. But that's not for today's video. So anyway, Benedict was picked. And the church will never say it, but I think they pressured him to step down or resign because he was too old school. I don't think there's anything wrong with the old school, especially when it comes to some religious beliefs. But again, it's not what I'm here for. I don't consider myself an old school theologian, however you say it. I don't consider myself old school because, again, I believe gays should have the right to do whatever the hell they want. I believe people should have the right to do whatever the hell they want. And whoever you love, that's between you and whoever you see as a higher power. That's not me, and I don't think it's for any kind of church to condemn you. So when they picked Francis, a lot of people were excited because he was the first Franciscan pope. Well, not the first Franciscan, but he was from Jesuits, and they are some of the coolest, so to speak, people in the faith, right? And I'm simplifying a lot of this. Plus, he was the first non-European Catholic since like the 8th century. He came from the Americas, which is showing how the church has progressed, I guess. I don't know, but it was an exciting thing. And then that fucker got in there and started talking about, if you consider yourself a Christian, you can't own guns. And he started talking about, he said things dealing with like coffee consumption and all these other things, and it just started looking really judgy. And that's where the anarchist in me started coming out and was like, fuck this guy. Again, would never wish death on anybody. Because like Biggie said, there ain't no coming back from that. But he did a lot of things that Catholic doctrine doesn't agree with. For instance, if you know anything about Catholicism, you know our masses are very organized and orchestrated. And I don't go to mass like I should. I tell people I'm an Irish Catholic, and if you know any Irish Catholics, a lot of them are kind of like laxed Catholics. But anyway, our masses are very organized. We know when to stand up. We know when to sit down. There's a lot of that goes on. But there's this part of the Mass where they say, peace be with you, and with you as well, has pretty much been what I grew up saying. And then it was, and with your spirit. Again, this is where the anarchist in me has problems with the faith. And the only real reason I hold on to any of it still, as I grow older and investigate and research and start thinking for myself and thinking outside of a religious aspect or a doctrine aspect, I start seeing a lot of things that I have issues with. There was a lot that I had issues with Pope John Paul II, but for the most part, up until his biggest scandal that came out, there wasn't really a whole lot I didn't agree with. As an adult. Now, as a kid, I had no idea. But as an adult, I never didn't really have a whole lot of issues. And then, unfortunately, all the bad stuff that came out about the priests and how he hid the priests that were accused of doing these horrible things. That's horrible. And then you find out that there was possibly a murder of a young girl, and potentially it was covered up. I don't know. That's between now him and his judger. I'm not a perfect Catholic by any stretch. But anyway. So I started looking into religion, Christianity as a whole, and all of these other things because, again, I have kids. And I was raised in a very religious household where I'm responsible for my kids, for their eternal life, and my wife as well. And I don't ever want to teach somebody something wrong. So I investigated, I dug in, I read, and I read, and I read. And that's when a lot of things started not making sense. Not just in Catholicism, but in Christianity as a whole. Like, just research Constantine, number one, and then research King James, for those of you that are just getting started in religious aspects of things, because what you'll find out about both of those guys will be very eye-opening. And I'll just leave it at that, because I'm not here to debate any kind of theology. But the only reason I hold on to any bit of Catholicism is because when my child was dying, that was the only thing that gave me comfort. And I know how ridiculous that is, especially when I say it out loud. But that comfort, that meant something. And it made me and my wife both feel some kind of relief in knowing that we'd see her again. And it still does. And that is honestly the only reason I hold on to any kind of Christian belief or any kind of Catholic belief. And I know that's, again, according to all the stuff I've read, that's not the way it works. But I've also said I'd rather believe the story in the way that I have come to understand it and be wrong than not believe it, or be right about the story than not believe it and be wrong. I'd rather believe in it and be right than not believe it and be wrong. And there is a hell and all this other stuff, right? Which again, I know is not the best faith. I'm still working on it because, again, if there was a God, and I know the lessons that I'm supposed to learn from my daughter's dying, my daughter's death, I don't see a loving God do that, but Again, not here for that. So, when they elected Pope Francis, and he started judging and condemning people, like, from what I can remember, again, most of Pope John Paul's term, I forget what it's called, but most of his term, I was a kid. And then when I was in adulthood, I didn't really pay as much attention to it as I should have, because it was just something that I always did, right? It was just, I always went to Mass. I always did this. Ever since I was young, it was just something that I took on myself to do. And then when I met my wife, we did it. And, now I'm at a different point where I don't grovel at the church. There's a lot of people that I know that are Catholic, a lot of people in my family that are Catholic, that they grovel at the church. And I don't do that. Like, for instance, the family, when they have a big dinner, they'll invite a priest. And I always see that priest as somebody that's taking advantage of their hospitality, drinking all of their good liquor, which is something that I have a problem with, the drinking. But all of that, everything about that just has always rubbed me wrong. And rubbed me wrong, I should say. And I don't like that image. And there was one particular event where I was smoking a cigar, and he just wondered if I would give him one. Give you one? I don't know you. And these things are expensive. Now, I had a family member come over and ask for one, and I gave it to him, but he's family. I somewhat know him. So it's like, I'm not that dude, right? I'm not going to worship the priest's feet. And a lot of people in my family and a lot of the friends that I know that are Catholic, they would never speak out against a priest, and I will do it in a heartbeat. It's the anarchist in me. But the whole judginess from Pope Francis, and again, this is what I was saying, I don't know if John Paul did it. I don't remember him doing it, but Francis condemned Trump. Take the religious aspect out of it. The Pope is also the head of Vatican City, which is its own entity. So you have a leader of another country that is criticizing a foreign leader of another country, one of its strongest allies, if you want to go that way, and some of their second biggest people that go and give money to that country, trying to simplify it. And you're going to sit there and talk smack about their leader. That's going to alienate a lot of people. Some that may be Catholic that voted for the man, right? So I didn't like that. And then the whole talking about guns. He said, if you consider yourself Christian, you cannot in good conscience own a gun. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. Not the best Catholic, not the best, most religious person out there. But even I know the Bible says, and I'll paraphrase, if you have a sword, sell your items and buy another one. The sword of today is a pew, pew, pew. So, I did not mean for this to get all religious, but such is life sometimes, I guess. And that never sat right with me. I didn't like that, because at the core of Christianity is you don't judge. And that was clearly a judgment coming from who's supposed to be one of the highest members of the largest Christian faith out there. He's called the Vicar of Christ, which means the stand-in for Christ, basically. Like, he's representing Christ. And a lot of people that are the deep believers that would never question, that would never look at the hypocrisies of the church, that would never look at these things, would believe that they should sell their guns, not knowing that the Bible tells them to not only have a sword, but to sell everything they have and pick up another sword. I digress. So he died early this morning, it was announced, and now they are going to start the process of choosing another pope. A lot of Catholics believe that the pope will be the Antichrist, or who leads to Armageddon. And there's an old saying at the Basilica, they have these portraits all around the ceiling. And the old wise tale or whatever is, when the last one is filled, that's the last good pope. Whoever this next pope is the last place in the Basilica. Just saying. Now, I don't know how much of any of that is true. The anarchist in me just fights with this side a lot. This is why I say I'm not perfect, but again, I never wish death on nobody, but I hope whoever the Cardinals pick, that they right a lot of the wrongs that Francis did. And we had such high hope for Francis. And he took advantage of that. Another thing that I have a problem with, and had a problem with Benedict and Francis, is, have you ever noticed, like, Pope Francis was only 88 years old. He got hella fat. It's almost like the old days when you hear about, like, the French Revolution, where the king was starving his people, but he was getting fatter and fatter. Or the old Caesars that were getting fatter and fatter. And I hate to keep comparing, but Pope John Paul didn't get fat until he got really sick and couldn't move. He started to gain weight then. It didn't look like he was a gluttonous person. Not saying, just saying Pope Francis got really fat after he became Pope. In fact, probably the last 5 or 6 years of him being photographed, it didn't even look like him. It looked like somebody in a fat suit. That's how fat he had gotten. And he had health problems since he was a kid, but the health problems, they once they get something, they tend to go downhill quick. And that's another thing that the anarchist in me is like, nah, come on, right? Pope Francis had his health declined pretty rapidly in the last few years. And he's at peace now, hopefully. And he'll be judged just like the rest of us if the story's right. I don't know. But I hope the Cardinals get somebody that rights the ship, in my opinion, and isn't so judgy and so condemning and so, like, offer spiritual proof, like biblical reference as to why this is bad. Like, you're supposed to, as the quote-unquote vicar. Don't just come out and be like, this is wrong because I'm the Pope and I say so. And that's kind of what I got from Francis. But I digress. Pope Francis is dead at 88, April 21st. Hug your loved ones each and every day, because you never know when the good Lord will call them home. For every dark night, there's always a brighter day. Life's just a party, and parties weren't meant to last. Y'all be good. I'll see you when I see you.